Welcome everyone to the Learning to Birth webinar series where we interview some of the world's most interesting and inspiring thought leaders around birth and pregnancy. Today we have with us Barbara C. Decker. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, Barbara is a prenatal and perinatal psychology educator, a doula trainer from Capra, a registered hypnotherapist, and has been a childbirth educator for over 40 years and is one of only 15 facilitators in the US trained in prenatal bonding. And Barbara works in prenatal bonding education, preconception, gestation, and birth education. So thank you, Barbara, for joining us. We've got a lot to talk about today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and your history?
Well, I first became involved in birth because of my own birth. The first one was not particularly pretty. So when I had my second child, I didn't have any classes with the first one. It was over 50 years ago, and there were very few instructors. I was not at all prepared for my birth. And as I say, it wasn't really pretty because I had no tools to hold on to make it through the birth. I had no knowledge at all what was going on. And I happened to have a bad experience from the medication that they gave me. So they said, boy, when you have your next baby, we can't give you anything, so you better take classes with the next child. And once that's exactly what I did. I took classes with the next baby, and it made like the difference between life and, you know, it just changed everything for me. It was a totally different experience. So I called my instructor and said, I have to teach. I don't want anyone to ever go through birth without some education. And that's been my motto through my whole life. I'm 74 years old now, and I've never stopped teaching. And I've had wonderful experiences all through the years. After I became a childbirth educator, I became a doula. And at one of the doula conferences, I met this wonderful psychotherapist that talked about hypnosis for birth. And I was overwhelmed with the power of hypnosis. So I became a hypnobirthing practitioner. And once I became a hypnobirthing practitioner, then in the readings that we do, we have to recertify every year and read 2 books, you know, on birth and do book reports and so forth. So one of the books that I picked up the first year of hypnobirthing was The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, and by Thomas Ferney. And I read that book and I got angry because all the years I've been teaching childbirth, nobody ever talked about how important it was for the mothers to care for their babies in the womb. Here I was helping them birth and get the babies out, but no one was impressing the importance of the bonding in the womb. So I did more research on that and became a member of the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. And it's called APPPAH. And that's my international organization. We're all over the world, and I happen to be membership chair of that. But we have the most wonderful education program through that organization. And how APPA became the organization it is was a psychologist and a psychiatrist were working with mothers when they were in a relaxed state. Not just mothers, adults. And in a relaxed state, as they were regressing them throughout their life, because they would have come to the practitioners for help for some problem they were having. They were regressing back to the womb. And neither of these, Thomas Ferney and David Chamberlain was a psychologist, none of them thought that anyone would have a memory of being in the womb and remembering that early life, their births and so forth. They did their own research to verify the cases that they were doing with the parents of the person that was having the emotional problem, and all of the parents informed them that the stories were true, and how could they have known? So they took their paper to the American Psychological Association, and they thought they were crazy. So they started their own organization on their own. And that's where the research has been done over many, many, many years. And now what we understood, the gestational period, preparing and preconception, taking care of loving that baby all the way through the womb, and then birthing and your post-birth experience, we've been missing those first 9 months. That has a tremendous importance on the mental ability of the child growing in the womb. And that's why I'm so passionate about the prenatal period. And once I became a member of APA, Dr. Schroth from Germany is a psychiatrist who was looking to train people to facilitate parents through that gestational period and bond with their babies in a program called Prenatal Bonding BA, which is a German term. And the program came out of Hungary, and he was wanting to teach it in the United States. So I was one of his first students in the United States, and it shifted my whole world, because now instead of just having a childbirth education, getting the babies out, we're now trying to build healthy babies through the whole pregnancy. So the births are better. Postpartum is better. They have less than 1% postpartum depression when you do this method of prenatal bonding through the gestational period. Less than 1% of postpartum depression. When postpartum depression is rampant throughout the world. And these families are so bonded to their babies when they're in the womb that it makes a 180 feeling on what you're carrying within that womb. So it was hypnobirthing that we do affirmations, we talk to the baby, we play music. They go to sleep with relaxation, thinking about how the birth is going to be better. But it was hypnobirthing that opened that door for me, how important the bonding is. So I ended up writing my own program, which is called Empowering Pregnancy, that I encourage preconception, because when the parents welcome a baby to the womb, then that baby's whole energy field is totally different when a baby is wanted. And in the United States, we have 45% of our babies that aren't planned for, just mistimed, and about 20% aren't even wanted. And we're bringing these babies into the world. And I want to be part of encouraging different, preparing for pregnancy, getting your body in shape psychologically as well as physically. And that includes both parents. Because just think of all these children coming into the world that haven't been planned for and are not welcomed into the womb. And the energy that the cell, the sperm and the egg feel when they come together and a baby is conceived, that child carries that energy as those cells are expanding from one cell to another. And the cell biologist that really explains this well is Bruce Lipton. Are you familiar with anything about Bruce Lipton?
Oh, but this sounds fantastic. Tell us about it.
Oh, Bruce Lipton explains as a cellular biologist how the energy is, as though every one of those cells are expanding, they're carrying the energy. Is this a safe place for me to embody into a human being? or is it a place that I have to protect myself and keep myself safe and not bother my parents because I'm not really welcome here? Do I belong? Do I want to be there? It just, you have your choice of giving your child this loving, growing atmosphere when they can put their energy into growth, as opposed to, do I really want to come into this world? And sometimes babies make their own choice whether they want to come into the world. So they may not necessarily make it through the pregnancy. That doesn't mean that a miscarriage means that a person doesn't want them, because women have miscarriages, gosh, depending on what book that you have, 50% of conceptions are over 50 to 80 actually are conceived, but they don't actually implant. And we never know it. You think you're having a late period. So those that have the miscarriages a little bit later, oftentimes it's a physical thing, but it can also be an emotional thing. So just having that baby be able to be welcomed into a world where they're wanted is what we need to do for world peace. And it's like a dream, a utopia, because we don't really expect that to happen. I mean, people are going to take a chance on sex and accidents are going to happen. But when you pee on that stick, that's when you have to face the music. And many families are going through the trauma of wondering, can I give this child a life? What am I going to do? How am I going to make a decision? It's a tough time when they find out that they're pregnant with all of these 45% that didn't plan their pregnancies. So even the child understands that. I say child, a physician or a medical person would call them a fetus, but the fetus feels that environment of worry, whether they should be there or they shouldn't be there. And the more that we can teach parents, once they make the decision that they want to love this child and bring this child into the world, then they have the ability to repair and extend love to that baby just by putting their hands on their belly and rubbing that belly and saying, we're going to be safe. We're going to do this. No matter what, I want you to come. I want you to be here, and I want you to be loved. So it's just a whole new world that has opened up, understanding pre and perinatal psychology, that we used to think babies were blank slates when they were born. And yet it's totally false. What happens to that baby growing in the womb can change the architecture of the brain and the architecture of the nervous system while the woman is pregnant, depending on what the experience is for that pregnant mother. It's powerful work. And our parents really need to have this information. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
They sure do need this information, and it makes so much sense to me. I mean, why would it be that this baby with a brain and a nervous system doesn't feel or think, just because it doesn't have words, doesn't matter? Why would it feel and think nothing just because it's inside of something else? And then once it pops out, suddenly it's, the brain suddenly turns on and suddenly starts working, and the nervous, it makes no sense. And I think any mother who's carried a child, you certainly do feel them inside of you. You feel them reacting, you feel them responding. They're different, every day, depending almost on what your mood is and what you're doing, how they're behaving in your womb. And I both my children, I knew that they had very different personalities just based on how they behaved in my room. And then they came out and their personalities are pretty much stuck like that.
Mm-hmm.
My son, he would do loops around and he was kick, 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 kick all the time. And he came out kicking. He was kicking balls and running around at 8 months old. He would be running off the field, kicking a ball. Whereas my daughter, she was in there, scratch, scratch, scratch. And she's come out and she's like, she does all this little dainty little artwork, you know, they're completely different. So I knew in there they had their own, you know, destinies. So I guess the big questions are, Barbara, for some parents listening to this talk from you today, who want to love their child, who want their child to feel welcomed, so that their child in utero has the best opportunity. What do they do?
I think the first thing is they want to look at the relationship of themselves and their partner. And because there is a term called intergenerational stressors. We are programmed by our parents, both in the womb and out of the womb. And it's important for the parents to talk about their relationship, what their childhood was like, what they were parented like, whether they were welcomed into the world, whether they feel safe, whether they were adopted, whether they were in foster care. What experiences did they have when they were young? And those programs are here. They're also in their bodies. So we carry a lot of emotion. And when something is triggered and reminds us, that's something, I remember that in my home, that is a trigger. And they may take it out in this generation if they don't address the things that bring them to anger, violence, inability to have a relationship. It's all coming from those very early years in the 9 months in the womb. A person's emotional intelligence is built from the epigenetics. This is Bruce's specialty. The epigenetics, the environment around that pregnant woman. If it's a tough one and she's under chronic stress, she's at work, she's under stress, at home, she's under stress, she can barely get enough breaks, then what do you think that child is apt to be feeling when he's coming into the world, he or she? They're wired to protect themselves for chronic stress because the mother's pushing all of these stress hormones through her bloodstream that are flooding the uterus and changing the brain and setting up the nervous system. So even with, that's why with my program that I developed, I started much earlier, preconception or just when they find out they pee in that stick, that they're pregnant, that's the point that you realize when you've made the decision, if you're going to keep this baby, then just put your hands on your belly and say to your baby, somehow we're going to make it. I want you. I love you. And when you talk like that, what's running through your bloodstream? Oxytocin. And oxytocin and cortisol cannot run through your body at the same time. So it is stopping that overload of cortisol to let this child know that part of the day is going to be stressful and part of the day is going to be loving. So even if you do that a few times a day to reassure that baby that they are loved, that emotional regulation is going to be stronger. And it's important through that pregnancy and 9 months later. That's what is an innate emotional intelligence that gives them the resilience to make it through the rest of their life. Those experiences in those 18 months. And in many countries, in England, here in the United States, there are many speakers that are trying to say the first 1,000 days are what count, from conception to a couple of years, at the latest 2 years afterwards. We need to take care of our families so that these little babies can feel safe in the womb. They will have better regulated emotions. They won't be out there trying to shoot people in an argument. We used to have fist fights. Now you just go for a gun. People have very short fuses, and it's starting way back there. So that's why the program that I wrote is called Empowering Pregnancy, because I want to empower the pregnancy by empowering the parents to realize, not to put an extra job on them, to allow them to realize they can grow a baby that is going to be more resilient and more loving and more healthy mentally as well as physically. Because when the woman is having this chance to relieve her stress, get away from that stress, even if it's a few minutes, a couple of times a day, it can change the body chemistry and give this child a much better chance. And there have been wonderful research projects done by the Vandekars. He's an obstetrician, retired obstetrician, and his wife. They did a lot of research on they called it prenatal university. And during the third trimester, they would teach the parents to do these loving things, to actually teach the babies words by patting and rubbing and so forth, engaging that bonding within the womb. And before that, actually Fred Worth, who is a neonatologist, was working with many of these premature babies. And the premature babies, he didn't want to have to be putting needles into all these little premature babies. So he started his own program, and it was called Prenatal Parenting. And what he would do is he would take the moms and dads that had the premature babies when they were pregnant the next time, and he would have exercises for them, like writing exercises, journaling. When I found out that I was pregnant, I felt ... When my partner found out I was pregnant, they ... And they faced the realities of whether, coming on board, how important it was for them to come together and then nurture this love affair by doing, he called them fetal love breaks every 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day. Just take fetal love breaks all through that pregnancy. And he dropped the premature rates dramatically. So there have been research projects, but it's been very hard to get medicine to realize the importance of the emotional support of the woman during that pregnancy period. So I
don't think medicine will ever have that capacity to do it, because medicine, is kind of contained. Medicine is one facet of birth. It's not the whole container. But unfortunately, the medical model, it doesn't have any capacity to see the bigger container. It can only see itself and what is in itself. So, it's just like that allegory of the elephant and the people who could see the different part of the elephant. There's people like yourself who can see the whole elephant, but within the medical model, you're only taught the medical model. Therefore, you can only ever see that foot of the elephant or the nose. You can't see the whole elephant.
Right. But my psychiatrist teacher, when he was in school, was taught that the babies were autistic until they were 8 months old. And he obviously does not believe that anymore. But through the field of pre and perinatal psychology and the research of Chamberlain and Burney and so forth, and many people that are starting to realize that they're waking up to the fact. There's a program called the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, that is very prominent in the United States right now. And they are looking at what the children have experienced in their very early years, realizing that's what programmed these kids to have healthy lives or to have challenging lives. And so that's being addressed. So our organization has also made up a questionnaire for adverse prenatal experiences. Were you wanted? Do you feel like you're enough? And if you fit into those categories, there's people around that are able to help you realize that that's what happened to you, but it doesn't have to control you the rest of your life. You have the potential to be anything. What you were programmed with does not have to control your life through your future. The sooner that we can help people address that, the better. And actually, medicine is addressing it, because also with the organization APA, there's been wonderful research done that is explaining why we have obese problems, why our children are, what they're eating, nutrition during that pregnancy period can change the way the baby's health system grows. Are they going to grow up having cardiology problems? Are they going to have diabetic problems and so forth? So that's being looked at also. And studies were done many, many years ago, for example, on right after World War II in Holland, the Germans starved the Dutch. And the women that were pregnant during that period actually had very small babies because they were under so much stress. There was no food. And so those babies that were born during that period of time ended up with they had cardiac problems, they had endocrine problems, they had a very high rate of schizophrenia, and all those children grew up to be adults that had all of these problems that were exacerbated as they grew into adulthood, and they died at young ages. And it carried into the next generation, because they were carrying the reproductive organs for their grandchildren. So it carried through 3 generations with what the family eats when they're pregnant. So physiologically, there's knowledge to be given. Psychologically, to build a healthy relationship with the partners. And then understanding babies are sentient. Babies feel, babies sense, babies learn from their environment around them. It is up to the family to be empowered to make a difference, to bring the babies into the world in a healthier frame of mind. So this is why I'm so passionate about this field, and it's expanding on a daily basis. APA has a wonderful program, the Prenatal Educator Program, and then Gerhardt's been wanting to train more people from around the world. He teaches the only English-speaking course for the prenatal bonding, and he's out of Germany. So people would travel to him, but he's looking forward to people that are interested in this field. And the program is written for someone that's a doula, someone that's a childbirth educator, someone that's a psychologist. It's not psychotherapy. It is helping the parents bond with that baby from really early during the pregnancy. And I've worked with couples from soon as they peed on the stick till some, like I happened to receive a case and she was due in a week. Now, that's normally, my teacher, Gerhardt, says, how do you do it? How do you do it when you get someone at the last minute and you're still able to help them bond with those babies? I actually don't work in an office, so I make time to spend with my parents, and I'm able to between the history and then the time that we work with mother and baby and daddy and baby, or partner and baby, because we have so many different types of families out there now. It could be two men that want to be parents. It could be a man and a woman. It could be two women. As long as that child has love, that child is going to be emotionally so much better than a child that has had challenges, doesn't feel wanted, doesn't have self-esteem. That all stems from that love that they get in that early part of their life. So that's the joy of the work that I do, and I have no intentions of leaving it until I'm 6 feet under. And I'm also a doula. So the doulas have a role in giving the emotional support during the birth. And that's what I will be doing sometime in the next couple of days. I have not given up my assisting for births.
Yes. Barbara said before this call, oh, I might not be able to make it because there's a mummy on the way soon with a baby. And it's like, that's okay. We'll be fine. Just we'll work around that. So.
Yeah. But isn't this fascinating knowledge to try? Our goal is to help the psychology field, psychiatry field, midwives, anyone that works in the field of birthing, to have the knowledge, gain the knowledge, how important it is to plan for your babies whenever possible. When you're already pregnant, to be able to be loving when you've made the decision, you're going to keep this little one and you want to nurture it, then your nurturing starts from that point on, and you keep doing that nurturing. We have, because of the neuroscience field, we know that in the field of animals especially, that when mothers are totally stressed out and they don't get release from the stress, that they don't know how to love their little ones. So
they don't bond.
So no. Exactly. So that's where you have to look back in our history. Well, what about your mother? What did she experience? What did your father experience? If they didn't experience love and bonding, then they weren't able to show you. But you can do it. Now that you know that you have this power, then you have a greater chance of being able to do that nurturing and helping this baby come into the world in a much healthier frame of mind. They just need to have the information. So the more people that get into this field, then there's going to be world change. As Vernie says, Dr. Vernie says, is the embryonic, the gestational environment is going to make the difference in world peace. Ecology in the womb is going to make a difference in ecology around the world. I mean, this is a massive educational program that we need to help our parents be able to nurture. I was in India in January at a big birth conference, and in India, they have known for 6,500 years that you nurture the babies in the womb. They plan for them. They have exercises they do each month in their programs, and the special exercises, chants, singing. They do it each month of the pregnancy so this child feels welcomed into the world. They have better births, better outcomes, and it's all because of the love that they're giving these babies. And there were 300 pediatricians and obstetricians at that conference in India last fall. So the world is waking up to the need to help our parents be more empowered at being good parents. But it starts in the womb, receiving, feeling, loving that little one that's inside. Give them the chance to grow healthy rather than being in the womb having to protect themselves because they're full of fear. And Bruce Lipton, it's Nature, Nurture, and the Power of Love is his movie. It's also his book. And this is a brilliant man, being a cell biologist. And he did his research he found out about it by cloning. He was working with the cloning, and he was just curious about the nucleus. And the nucleus, we were always taught that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. Did you learn that in biology class? The nucleus is the brain of the cell.
Look, it's been a few years since I've done biology. I did it at school, and I was doing, you know, I haven't, so I'm going to just trust you on that in terms of what your education was, because I can't quite remember.
Well, what he did was he put cells from different bone cells, stem cells, bone cells, nerve cells, blood cells. He put them all in petri dishes to see how long, and he took out the nucleus. So all they had was the cytoplasmic proteins and so forth that were in it. And he wondered how long the cells would live outside the body. And they lived just as long outside the body as they would have inside the body. And he's going, wait a minute. If you're a human and your brain is taken out, would you live? No, you wouldn't survive without your brain. How can a cell survive without a brain? Well, obviously the nucleus is not the brain. The brain is the environment around that cell. He put other cells in a toxic environment with a poisonous agar, and they all shriveled up and died. So depending on the environment the cells were put in, whether they thrived or whether they died, had to do with the environment that those petri dishes had in that plate. The petri dishes, the proper environment, in other words, a loving environment from a family, has a greater chance of helping a healthy baby come into the world than toxic stress, which many, many of our families face these days. Just getting away from that stress for just a couple of times a day, being able to nurture this little one, is lowering their stress hormones, and it's building the oxytocin. So what is going to give your baby the best chance? That loving environment that we want you. We love you, and we welcome you to this world. I know, it is a beautiful idea. We need more. We need more teachers. We need more people in our organization.
You certainly need more awareness. My personal belief, based on what I've been taught and experienced, is that, you know, all things, of course, being equal and optimal for the baby as they come into the womb, is that we're programmed from a physiological perspective. Like, we have a program for joy. Like, our bodies, like we feel joy and we experience joy, and joy is like our innate and natural way of being. And maybe being in India, you would have heard the term for it. It's Sahaja Samadhi, like our natural inborn joy. And our experiences through the womb, through birth, through enculturation and upbringing, they take us away from that path of joy. And I think as we mature as a global culture, because obviously, you know, small communities, they can have a lot better chances to take care of each other. But, you know, as a human species, we've you know, burst forth, billions and billions of us. We're trying, you know, we've got machines and internet and, you know, globalization, and we have to find new balance, and we have to find how to preserve in ourselves and our babies that innate program for joy whilst doing and being all the things that we're doing and being. And I think the maturation of human culture into the 21st century and the 22nd will be about remembering the skills to hold on to that joy within us and preserve it in our children in utero, and particularly to look after mothers with those children in utero, so that whether they have partners who, for whatever reason, you know, they reject the child, they reject the mother because of their own trauma and sense of lack of abundance and need to control, for whatever reason those mothers get rejected, you know, we as a culture are kind of responsible for the conditions such that they got pregnant. That 49% got pregnant without expecting it or planning it consciously. We as a culture are responsible for that. So we need to take care of those mothers such that the next generation know how to consciously plan their pregnancy and consciously love their baby and bring them forth, so that we can turn it around and we can have that beautiful ecology for birth and ecology for life in abundance and in balance with our, you know, our world as we're embracing it as a
You're
whole
absolutely
system.
You're absolutely right. We have a wonderful professor out here at the University of Washington, Stephen Barushka, and he has a TED Talk, wonderful TED Talk. And his whole premise is, don't spend all the money at the end of life. Spend our government money at the beginning of life, where these mothers are getting the emotional support. They're getting a roof over their head. They're getting the proper food so they can nurture this child in the womb and give them the tools to be good mothers, that emotional support. Then we're going to save billions in the long run if we take care of
psychological issues potentially. There's all these other things that potentially won't happen. I think in Australia, I'm going to look up that TED Talk, but I think in Australia, the idea is that, at least I was sensitive to this, is that if we start looking after mothers financially, all we're going to do is encourage, you know, these young women to just, you know, take drugs, not get a job, have sex, have babies, and then get paid by the government forever to have babies. Now, if you're out there and you're thinking that is your life plan, I'm going to tell you it's not. It's not an easy life. You don't choose that willingly. And that's not something to be afraid of. If anything, if you took care of these young mums whilst they were pregnant, you would then enable them to make different choices and different paths for their future life and their lives of their children, such that those sorts of patterns, if they exist, and I'm not convinced they do in general, they would stop. So yeah, really interesting, this whole dilemma of where we put our money. That's a really interesting concept there.
And it just look at the other aspect too. There are places in third world countries, they're not rich, but they have a large family support system. And when you have that family support system or that village support system, you're not seeing the emotional trauma in the children, because the mothers are cared for by their community. But we're so spread out all over the world that we don't have that support system anymore. So the emotional support needs to come to these families, these mothers, when they do get pregnant. And it shouldn't come from shame. It should not come from judgment. They're in a predicament. We need to help them gain self-esteem and help them understand what a wonderful mother they can be when they have the right tools, and help also understand where they came from. I just saw a movie this evening, waiting to do the interview, and it was called Paper Tigers. And it was all about a bunch of teenagers in a school that was just totally disruptive school. And they brought in some professionals that had emotional support systems for these students, completely turned the whole school around. It's the emotional support that mothers need, that we have to teach for teachers. We need to encourage and empower the mothers that are bringing these babies in the world to know how important the gestational period is. It isn't just after birth. So
Absolutely.
I have great hope because we are gaining members throughout the world. I will again mention the name APPA, Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. When you look it up, it's birth psychology. And there are programs we're building for parents, for midwives, and just for anybody that wants to learn how you can be imprinted by your experiences that young in the womb, and then how and where you can get help if you recognize you have some of these imprints so that you can get better and be the person that you're capable of being, the human being that you have the ability to be. That's our goal. Prevention and education and healing. We need more of it in the world. So it isn't about just birth, because I'm a firm believer in hypnobirthing, because that's what opened my mind to how important that bonding was. And I have to say, my preference in education is definitely hypnobirthing. I am passionate about it because I see the outcomes. We address fears with the parents. We give them tools to relax. And all of the system, the program really gives a better outcome for the parents because they're already parenting in the womb. They're not quite so shocked when birth takes place. Their births are better, they're more welcoming. They tend to be much more relaxed during the birthing. And that bonding that they take in that childbirth class, the babies feel it because they're listening to CDs every night, and those babies are feeling that love, that vibration that is happening to this mother while she's taking these classes, and the parents that are attending. It comes out in the end, the babies are calmer. They've got that emotional resistance because they felt the love in the womb. So when they're born, they're much calmer babies. So we're definitely making a difference with those people that take these hypnobirthing courses. It's very powerful work. Very rewarding for me.
It is very, very powerful work. I'm very always interested in hypnosis and the paths you can take with the hypnotherapy of yourself. I guess, Barbara, if someone's listening to this and they want to reach out to you to work with you or take your courses, how do they connect with you, Barbara?
The best way would be to look me up under Soul of Birthing on the internet, Soul of Birthing or Empowering Pregnancy. Those are both my websites, and my phone number is on there. My phone number is the same on WhatsApp as well as it is on my own phone number, so they could reach me from wherever they are, because I've been teaching a woman my Empowering Pregnancy class. It's 8 hours long, and I have a woman in the one in Perth that just finished taking that program, and I worked with a woman in Cairo. And, with the internet, you can do all sorts of wonderful things. But my dream would be to have people have the education to be right there in person, to be with these people, if at all possible, and to train with Gerhard Schroth and learn more in much more depth how we can help these families. But the key is that family relationship, you want to build it and make it stronger so that this baby can grow in a healthy environment. And there are times where the relationship isn't healthy and the woman has to do it herself. She can still do it. She can still do it by loving this little pumpkin in there. So learning your past can program you for what you are, but that does not mean that you have to stay in that state. Once you learn about your options and why you are the way you are, then you have a great chance of healing and moving on and being a wonderful parent. And that's what I'd like to leave with your families, is that no matter what you started with, our jails are full of people that didn't get the right start, but they are oftentimes very sensitive underneath, and they're needing the love that they didn't get. And another I don't know whether you have seen the movie In Utero. Have you ever heard of that? Okay, that's a movie. Okay, In Utero was done a couple of years ago, and it's a wake-up call. It's a bunch of psychiatrists, a group of psychiatrists and psychologists that have been interviewed on what happens to a baby that's in the womb when the environment may or may not be good, and how the outcomes, how things can change, in the outcome, how you can have certain imprints. So In Utero is a fascinating movie to watch, but watch it with someone that you trust, because it may trigger something that comes up in your system. That's another resource, as well as these wonderful books by Windows in the Womb by David Chamberlain, Thomas Verney, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child. What was another one here? Prenatal Parenting by Fred Worth, Enriching Heredity. I mean, there's just new books coming out all the time by wonderful people that are helping people heal. I want to prevent it. I want to teach these parents. That's the goal, is to teach teachers so that we can have enough throughout the world, that these children and these families are learning this stuff, this information. It would even be better if they got it in a sex class in the 7th grade. If they realize that when you get pregnant, if you get pregnant as a young teenager, that isn't a thing that's growing inside. It's going to become an adult. and what power you can have to give that little one a greatest chance of coming into the world and being a healthy human being, whether or not it happens accidentally. So if we could get it into the school systems, to how important the nurturing is during the gestational period, that would be the best. But until we get there, then it's important that every one of our families have this knowledge that those babies in the womb need to be nurtured, and you have the power to do it.
That's so true. I think it is something our kids need to learn. It is something that is probably the most important thing to have in schools. Probably it's not the least, it's the most. How important it is just to love before and after and through that 1,000 days, as you talked about, Barbara. Thank you very much for being with us.
Oh.
And your courses sound amazing. Your websites are really great. And I guess before we go, I'll just ask you what your vision would be. Like, if everyone were to love their children at conception and through utero, and hopefully that 1,000 days, like, what would the world look like?
What would the world look like? That's right. It would be a very different place, because the key word is love. And when you haven't received love, it's very hard to give love. That's why we need to help those that have not been nurtured, to look at them. Why are they taking the drugs? Why are they using alcohol? Because they're killing their pain from not being loved. And that's Gabor Mate, a very famous doctor you're aware of Gabor.
The book, Hold On to Your Kids, and Hold On to Your Kids is his
Hold On
book.
to Your Kids and The Realm of the Hungry Ghost. He's also In Utero. He's in the movie. as well as Dr. Barushka. He really helps to explain that that environment is what builds a child that's going to be resilient, that probably will not be needing the drugs and the alcohol when they grow up, because they're loved and they're whole and they have a healthy mind as well as a healthy body. We can do this. We can do this. It just needs to be recognized.
Yes, it would be fantastic for every new mum and dad to be taking this course with you. And I wish you the best of luck getting it out there so that more people can find out about it and take it and learn from it and become ultimately teachers like you did yourself.
That's the goal. I love teaching teachers, because we need many, many throughout the world. So thank you so much for having me share this love and the options that that we can do for anybody that wants to learn more. Really, it's badly needed, and we do want the world to be more of a peaceful place and not living on edge like we are right now. Yeah, we can make a difference.
I think the world wants it too. The world wants it too, Barbara.
Yeah.
The world's desperately asking for it, and I guess this might sound a little bit woo-woo, but I guess like if we just ask the world, you know, how can we help Barbara, you know, with this mission to do this, because it's so beautiful and, you know, it'd be wonderful, the world, you know, how can we, universe, just create this?
Yes.
So,
yep. Spread it around the world, because it's happening with our organizations. So please, you know, anybody write to me. They can look up birth psychology and they can look up my websites. I will get them in contact. Let's spread the word and have more beautiful births, because when they're loving their little pumpkins in there, it can improve the outcome. Not, you know, we're going to need our obstetricians, we're going to need our midwives, you know, for our birthing, but the outcomes, when you're not so fearful of your birth, makes a big difference in the number of challenges that you have during birthing. So look into hypnobirthing, look into birth psychology, look into prenatal bonding, and your world will change. You can have a 180 feeling on not being afraid of being a parent.
And I think as is it Marianne Williamson has said, and I'm sure she wasn't the first, you can choose love or you can choose fear. So choose love. That's definitely your message. Choose love and do get the tools and the skills that you need to just realize that love is your choice.
Yes, yes. And we are so lucky that she ran for, you know, trying for the presidency, for her voice to get out there to the public, because a lot of people would not have received that message. And here was a woman on a stage up there willing to offer her thoughts. People probably would have thought, oh, she is, you know, she's too woo-woo. But the point is, she's right. What we have is chaos, and we've lost that focus of family, caring, compassion for one another with everyone throughout the world. We need each other. We need people.
It's possible, but I mean, maybe she might not win this time, but maybe another time, or someone like her, because New Zealand, which isn't that far from Australia, has such a prime minister. So it is possible.
Really?
She's a woman. She breastfeeds in Parliament. So I know, breastfeeding in Parliament, right? Epic, totally epic, world-changing.
Isn't that wonderful? All right, well, power to healthy families. Thank you so much for giving me this bully pulpit to spread the word on how important the gestational period is. Okay, thank you so much.
Everyone for joining us. Thank you, Barbara, for joining us. Everyone, you can follow Learning to Birth at Learn to Birth on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you next time for the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right.